Pratham is one of the largest NGOs working in India, probably in the world. But more importantly, Pratham is also one of the most innovative and passionate organizations that we have ever dealt with. Pratham's, and a lot of that innovation, that energy, the drive, and the passion comes from two leaders behind it. Madhav Chavan, who unfortunately isn't here. He chose to go for an IIT alumni reunion over us. Madhav, we registered this. And Rukmini Banerji, who is here today. Rukmini is the brain behind USSR, one of the largest evaluations conducted in India on learning outcomes with sending surveys right down to the village level to really understand, are the kids learning? The kids are showing up to school, but are the schools failing them? Are they really providing them the education that they need? Pratham is also the organization that you heard Sean Cole talk about when he was talking about setting up the first RCT in India. So we're really, really excited to hear from Rukmini Banerji.
It's a great pleasure to be here. We've been given so many instructions with so many things to do that I hope I do them right. As I was listening to different people this morning, I realized that we have known what I thought was JPAL for well over 10 years. So this must mean that we were with you in the prenatal stage. I think it's an appropriate term for at least one of the directors here today. And so I don't know if you were here before the white envelope or after, but I do remember one morning when Esther and Abhijit came to our office. Our office was so small that between Abhijit's legs and the rest of us, we were just about able to fit. And I remember being very skeptical, number one, about why these MIT professors were interested in us, and number two, about whether Esther was at all a professor. And I have to say, that hasn't changed. I still look at her and wonder, is she masquerading? But clearly at MIT, everybody accepts her, so she must be a professor. I also look around at many of the people who I think Sean named, Mike, Mark, Jim, Annie, Sean himself, and I'm convinced that 10 years ago, JPAL used child labor. To me, they look very young even now. We've learned many things from JPAL, as have all of us. We've learned the meaning of the word random at a kind of macro level. Every time we ran a project with them, there was some random event like earthquakes in Gujarat, floods in Bombay. There were micro-level random events like a middle-of-the-night phone call saying, oh, by the way, the JPAL RA in Bihar was driving his motorcycle without a license, has crashed into a group of people, and so on and so forth. We've learned the meanings of the word treatment and control. A few years ago, we were doing this project which involved schools, and I remember one of my young Pratham colleagues taking me around, pointing to one school and saying, this is a treatment school, this is a control school, and this is a school beyond control. And I have to say that that's my feeling about the Indian education system sometimes. But perhaps one of the most enduring memories is of Michael Walton and myself. And this was in the summer of 2008. And we heard all of a sudden that the government of Bihar had announced summer camps. It was partly what I now realize is called policy influence. But it was very inconvenient because we had just set up what we were going to do, and so there was nothing else to be done other than Michael and me personally going from school to school, begging schools to stop doing the summer camp so we could have a good control group. And this was met with very strange reactions because many teachers said that people come to them to say, start working, and very few have ever come and said, stop working. I told Esther that for a birthday, one must have just memories and stories, but she said, no, I have to be a little bit serious as well. So here's, is this working? Yes. So what have we been doing for the last 10 years? One of the things that we've been very focused on as to what will improve children's learning. And this may seem very little, but over the last 10, 12 years, here are some of the things we've learned. To many people outside India, this seems completely common sense. Figure out where the children are right now. Doesn't everybody do that? We didn't. Set up reasonable goals. That seems to be a basic principle of teaching anybody anything. But for some reason, in India, we have very high goals. If we were to have a headline coming out of this research, I would use Abhijit's line, which he used recently, to say, kill the syllabus, save the children. I think setting reasonable goals is an important part of what we do. Teaching children by level than by grade, using methods that are appropriate, and so on and so forth. And although these seem like very, very common sense bullet points, I think that we have learned them using a whole variety of experiments and a collection of evidence and impact evaluations, which have taken us from rural India to urban India to different states. And I think a collection of all of these makes us very confident that some of the things that we are saying are really solid. A second important thing that I think we've learned is about scale up. I find this word scale very interesting. When we ran a program in Bombay, I mean, Bombay is a big city, it has about 1,200 schools, we thought we were on large scale. We now work in many states in India and run very large programs, and we still think we are on scale. So somebody has to come up with a good definition about what do we mean by scale. But scaling up is another whole kind of mysterious process. The assumptions, I think, that we would all like to believe is that you conduct an intervention, do a very good gold standard evaluation, everybody is very convinced by the evidence, and then it's scaled up. But lo and behold, over the last 12 years, I see very little evidence of this linear process. We see that a lot of learnings come out of each of these experiments, and we do see scale up, but often, almost always, not where you did the actual experiment and hope that it would scale up from there. I mean, I know Annie will speak about Ghana, and I think that the RCTs in India had something to do with Ghana. We've just finished a very well-done program in a state called Haryana in India, where there doesn't seem to be any signs of scaling up just yet, but a state across the country has scaled up the same idea statewide. So what we've learned is this is not a linear process. It takes time. You learn a lot. You have to keep at it, and something will scale up somewhere. I'm not sure this is good enough, but I think that's what we learned, that I think the accumulated knowledge is going to pay dividends. A final thing that I think that perhaps we are one of the organizations with whom JPAL has had multiple, I counted, I think we have 10 or 12 RCTs over the last 10 years. And I think looking back on these relationships, there are a number of very definitive pieces to this partnership that I would like to flag. We've worked with a few other people, and I realize how spoiled we have become because of the JPAL partnership. This feeling of trust between each other, between the researchers and the implementers, a feeling of equality. We have never, ever felt that we were not equal partners in the process. Being able to actually design something together. Earlier, we had RCTs that we did on programs or interventions that had been done before. But now, over time, we have the confidence to launch an RCT along with a new program, because we know that the learnings from the process are so high that you don't want to miss out on the process of learning how to do things better. We've also learned a little bit about how you take the results and you feed them back into action. And I remember not a few months ago where we had a presentation first in English done to an academic audience, and then a presentation in Hindi done to the entire staff, so that simultaneously, at different levels, people could understand what we had learned. I think fundamentally, what JPAL has helped us to do, we were a pretty curious organization to begin with. We knew that given there are many things to be done in the world, we always have resources which are less than you'd like, but you also have capabilities which may be limited. So given this cast of characters, if you may, what is the best thing for us to do? So we were always curious about that, But I think what JPAL has helped us do is to become even more curious and create a culture within the organization of trying to figure out what works. And as we often say, if you don't have questions, having a lot of good data or having results doesn't matter. So how do you go about creating and sustaining organizations like ours, like the government, or other agencies, where this curiosity is really what keeps us going? So I'd like to finish with taking a little bit of liberty. Iqbal and Rachel, I'm sure you wouldn't mind. I know perhaps there are people who've come from even further than me for this event, but I've never come so far for a birthday party. And I've never been at a birthday party for so many people. So I was curious to see what it would sound like if 1,200 people said happy birthday together. So on the count of 3, I want everyone to say happy birthday, JPAL. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, JPAL. I didn't want to risk the singing because I'm not sure how good people are. But thank you very much for having us here. And I think for the next anniversary, I don't know if MIT has a stadium, but I think that's what you're going to have to rent. Thank you.